everyone. My name is Eric Marks. I'm on the MPSE Board of Directors. First, some MPSE announcements. The summer edition of our magazine, MPSE Wavelength, recently arrived in members' mailboxes and is also available online. There's tons of great content in there, including my interview with Leilani Ramirez, Senior Manager of Dialogue at PlayStation. I highly recommend checking out the full magazine at mpse.org. At the MPSE store, you'll find lots of fun stuff for the summer in our Summer Waves collection. That's mpse.org/store to check out clothes and items that best suit your style. On our MPSE YouTube channel, you'll find lots of great sound advice events from the past few years. Head there to see sound breakdowns with the sound teams who worked on Mr. Robot, Better Call Saul, Metal Gear Solid, and much more. And thank you for coming to tonight's sound advice event. In the 1990s, first-person shooters on consoles were problematic and not very immersive. For those of us old enough to remember, multiplayer often had massive frame rate slowdown, and online play was a distant dream. Science fiction storytelling in console games also left a lot to be desired. But in 2001, a singular game changed everything. Halo Combat Evolved was a launch title for the original Xbox, and it was a giant success. It instantly solidified the importance of Microsoft's console in our living rooms. Halo immediately transformed not only first-person shooters on consoles, but also local and online multiplayer, rich audio and music, and sci-fi universes as a whole. After the first 3 games in the series, Halo 4 and every mainline game since has been developed by 343 Industries and Xbox Game Studios. Each of these games has pushed the envelope with incredibly polished and deeply immersive experiences. Fans can still identify iconic sounds such as all the details of weapons, vehicles such as the Warthog, the processing of Cortana's voice, and much more. But while much is familiar, everything has been significantly sweetened and sounds even more impactful and full frequency with every game. Thanks to the success of every title, Halo is still the biggest first-party franchise on Xbox today. Most recently, Halo Infinite has won 2 DICE Awards, 2 Navigator Awards, and 2 Game Audio Network Guild Awards. It was also nominated for an MPSE Golden Reel Award in the Game Audio category. To help us learn about all of this, I'm thrilled to be joined by 4 key members of the audio team on Halo Infinite. We are joined tonight by audio director Sotaro Tojima, lead sound designer Kyle Fraser, senior sound designer Robbie Elias, senior sound designer Jomo Kangethe, and that's our group for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. First question to each of you: what makes the sonic world of Halo unique?
Yeah, for me, what really makes the sonic world of Halo unique, it's got to be the very clean and dynamic mix. That, when it's coupled with the very punchy and tight combat, and you couple that with, very satisfying and very engaging user feedback sounds, it just really kind of helps elevate the gameplay. And I think that to me is what's really unique.
Your team began working on the Halo franchise after taking over from Bungie in 2007. What was this transition like for your 343 Industries sound team?
Yeah, I would take the question, and it was a great question. So it was pretty much re-establishing a whole new studio to inherit such a popular video game franchise, which is pretty unique case in an industry. So when I joined in 343 in 2009, so I think there were only about 30 people in 343, and only few people moved from the previous studio, Bungie, and everyone else is completely new to Halo. So, and I was only audio members when I joined in. So, and only I have was access to all the Halo game data, and pretty much that's it. Kind of empty start. And creative director asked me, so my mission is whatever sound, so you feel it's gonna work for a future Halo, whatever sound you wanna make it. So pretty kind of free and empty start. And definitely kind of my first mission is team making, so I couldn't do anything by myself. So, and I got a kind of first small project, which is making an internal concept trailer of Halo 4 for internal purpose. I think it was like a couple of minutes of concept trailer. And I need to work on the audio post-production for the very first concept trailer. And I reached out to a Sound Rebel, which is Microsoft Central Audio Group. And I reached out to a manager, and so I asked to give us support for sound design and a Pro Tools facility. And so the manager was super supportive and very helpful, and he assigned a sound designer because it's a Halo, like a big project. So and he assigned me a very special star player who was Kyle Fraser, actually. And so we worked together, Kyle and me, worked in the sound level, sound stage, and worked for weeks, I think. And actually, I couldn't talk English pretty much at all. So that's why, like, any kind of creative conversation, we handled it through the web translator between Japanese and English. So, and we made a pretty impressive sound through this kind of weird process. And you might guess, kind of, it's gonna be, wow, it's a challenging, like a tough, communication, and not gonna be a fun work. But to me, it was not. It was actually very fun work. And after finishing the project, so I feel kind of some strong sense, wow, so I just want to work with this guy because I felt there's something very similar passion, philosophy, and motivation, and what is the Halo audio should be, the kind of things. And I kind of soon offered to Kyle Fraser, and he immediately accepted our offer, and he joined us, which was very, very kind of sweet and a fun starting point for my team creation. And so Kyle, pretty soon, just kind of couple of months after, since he joined us, he brought the Robbie to our team because he was one of the most reliable working partner. He was also working in the Sound Lab, and he's very passionate, hard worker, as well as pretty funny guy. So, and that's why like Kyle brought him to our team soon. And with hiring a couple of, just a couple of more people like audio devs. And we kind of started a group together, started to the journey to finding out so what's the best audio for future Halo with a small group together. So that was starting point of the transition, and a little bit kind of out of the topics, but like I also want to share a little bit story about the Jomo hiring. So when we are working for a Halo 5 project, we are getting very busy, and a tight schedule. We are fighting with a tight schedule, and we believed we need another very strong sound designer, actually to helping out the Halo 5 busy production. And we opened a new position as a sound designer. And we got many resume and a demo audio from the many candidates, fortunately. And, and there is quite many pretty great sounding demo and not so great sounding demo, to be honest. But like when we heard the Jomo's demo, I still remember we were just shocked. It was outstanding. It was really different. And Kyle, Robbie, me, so everyone immediately said, so this is a guy we want to work with. So it was very clear, no brainer. This is a guy. So it's just kind of 5-second decision for us. And we immediately offered to Jomo, and he accepted. But back then, like he was working in the Ninja Theory in the UK, and back then the migration was very challenging. In his case, we realizing that. So, wow, we need to wait this guy to join for 18 or 20 months. Thanks. Wow, it's too late to help the Halo 5 production. Then like I asked around for all reviewers, interviewers, and everyone again. So it's immediately, so we have two options, hire someone in a US based right now, or just wait 1.5 years for Jomo. And everyone immediately said, so let's wait. So this is the only guy we should work with. So, and we decided to wait. And so we got through the time-consuming process. And actually, right after finishing a Halo 5 production, we finally got him in our team. So, but it was definitely worth to wait. Then he is clearly now working as one of the star player in a 343 audio team. So that's the history of transition, and a little bit introducing the background of 3 of great sound designers.
That's amazing. I think it really speaks to your synergy and team building and what you've all kind of built together, that these games sound so great. I think that's really incredible to hear how you all came together as well.
Thank you.
So your team has now worked on multiple mainstream Halo titles, as you mentioned. What was your overall creative approach while working on Halo Infinite, and how has this approach evolved since Halo 4 when you started?
Great question. As a couple of people know, like my background is heavily on Metal Gear Solid. So I came from Metal Gear Solid Tojima production. So which means like my strong background is more like cinematic film post-production approach, which I learned a lot through the Metal Gear Solid experience, which is like a detailed and sophisticated and a rich soundscape, something more than the past video game fidelity, that kind of things. We actually brought it, try to bring in the similar philosophy, similar approach to a Halo 4 and Halo 5. I wanted to make the Halo sounds like more like a cinematic, like rich and sophisticated and detailed with the dynamics, that kind of things. But for some reason, so our sound designers and all our team members made a really high fidelity, great contents. But mixing wise, it didn't work for some reason. So then, actually, so I kind of started the Halo Infinite production with making some kind of research and data analysis. So let me share one of my deck from Halo Infinite internal like direction PowerPoint deck. So so I made a ton of like analysis after the Halo 5 project, because we finally had some kind of time because like our team needed to re-establishing a new engine. We finally got a little bit less busy time. So I made a ton of like data analysis with getting team members' help. And so one of the my analysis was so just kind of counting the enemies' weapon sounds. How dense, how many we are getting the sound weapon sound shot from the non-player enemies' AIs, because Halo 5 sounds is kind of mixing is a mess, and as a result, so we couldn't hear, the player couldn't hear the most critical combat audio feedback, which is enemy's shot. So as a result, kind of player is gonna die, without hearing any clear weapon sound shot, which is stressful moment. And I also didn't feel the great sense of audio fidelity as well, because losing the most impactful, most important critical combat audio feedback. So that's why I started to know, wanted to know, so how busy our combat sound is, how busy our combat itself is, and just kind of counting the enemy's gunshot across some competitors games and the past Halo title and Halo 5. And result was, so this is, kind of the result from about a 2 minutes of capture from one of the busiest combat situation in each game titles. And realizing that Halo 4, we got a 90 shots per 3 seconds in average. So which was much more than the classic Halo titles actually. Wow, I thought it was pretty busy, even Halo 4. And the other title, so I'm hiding the title name, but one of the great sounding modern FPS game, which has a 33 shot per 3 seconds. Wow, which is even busier. And other game, so it was a shocking, a 45 shots per 3 seconds, which is a 15 shot per 1 second, which is kind of crazy situation if it's a post-production situation. But actually the result of the Halo 5 was 72 shots per 3 seconds, which is crazy. And I was thinking about why. So 70 shots, 24 shots per 1 second is nightmare situation if it's a post-production situation. So, and why we are facing with such a tough situation for mixing wise, I was thinking, so what's the reason? And one of the reason was, as you seeing here, as the AI number counts, so AI numbers is getting more and more, increasing the number year by year because of the technology updated. The CPU and memory and audio technology, engine, so everything is going to be updated in a game industry. So which means a designer can handle much more enemies than before because of the CPU performance. So which also making our mixing situation harder. And the other reason,
Tojima-san, so sorry to interrupt. Are you sharing your screen already? I just wanted to make sure because I'm not seeing it.
I'm sorry, I'm not sharing screen yet. Sorry.
No problem.
Let me, sorry. What about now?
Yes, thank you.
So thank you, thanks so much. Apologize for everyone. So this is my screenshot from my data analysis. So Halo 4, 19, FPS A, 33, and B is a 45, and Halo 5, we get a 72 shots. And one of the reasons was, increasing, we are having a much more AI enemies, so which makes our mixing situation much harder. And another reason was, so Halo was very unique first-person shooter. So for example, some typical FPS game, so player character is gonna die with just getting a 5 shot. But Halo, in 5 cases, so we have a very strong super soldier Spartan Master Chief. He's a super strong Spartan and also having a strong shield system. Then, so Master Chief is not gonna die even until getting a 29 shots. So our game design itself is, rather than sneakily avoiding, kind of all the enemies shot. So Master Chief, you can getting an enemy's shot, try to giving a more shot than the enemies with getting a ton of a shot, enemy's shot. which is fine because you are not gonna die until getting a 29 shot. So which is Halo's game design, which Halo fans love it. So we totally realizing that. So wow, so our situation is tough. So we have to handle just so many sounds in a chaotic combat. That is our mission if we want to work for Halo. Then so this is so the initial pillars which I establishing right after the analysis, data analysis after the Halo 5. And actually the 3 pillars, one is impactful and clear, and the second was immersive, and the third one is dramatic and dynamic. And actually the 2 of 3 is purely for make game itself fun. So our journey of the Halo Infinite is finding a best audio experience to make combat itself more immersive and fun through the better and clear audio feedback, which is opposite from the Halo 4, Halo 5 approach, which is a detailed approach. And now, so Halo Infinite pillar is a more focused approach. And let me sharing just kind of 2 examples how our team tried to achieve these pillars. So one thing we did is bringing a slot level volume control system. So in this scenario on the screen, so actually the 12 enemies are shooting right now, firing the gun right now. And it's all pretty busy, like a rapid fire shot. So, and it sounds very chaotic. So you see like some kind of waveform around here. So you're seeing, so this sounds not dynamic at all, so compared to other competitive titles, our sound is so muddy because we are getting a 24 shot per second. And I made this kind of wave shape really short for just kind of visibility purpose, but actually kind of each shot has 2 to 3 seconds of wavelengths, which means like each shot is masked by other gun sound itself. And as a result, we are making such a kind of muddy, no impact mix experience. So then back to here, and the kind of bad sound, kind of mess mixing is happening already in this scenario because we are having a 12 of gunshot right now. So, and with a new kind of technology, which we call the threat level volume control. So our system is calculating each weapon sounds priority frame by frame. So just kind of try to figure out, kind of how many enemies are firing the gun right now, each frame, and giving a priority based on if the non-player character is enemy or company, or even like if the enemy is shooting at you or any other my company team members. And also distant based. The system is giving a priority and turn up dramatically for priority 1 enemies because he is shooting at you, which is super critical audio feedback for gameplay. And finding another 2 characters, they are also aiming at you, but in this case, this is lower priorities than the priority 1 because it's a little far. Then like still making the turning up a little bit, not as much as priority 1 character, but a little bit enhanced, and turn off the rest of enemy gunshot frame by frame. So it was we had 12 sounds at the same times, but now, so we are focusing on only 3 important gunshot. So then the kind of our mix is getting much more clear, and player can hear the most critical audio cues for immersive combat. So that was a threat level volume control to make our mixing much more cleaner and the combat itself more immersive. And just kind of as an example is contents approach in the sound designer team. So this is a wave shape comparison of the sidearm pistol, magnum pistol on the Halo 5. So, compared to a wave shape. So Halo 5 enemy gun sound contents is a really good, really high fidelity. I love it. But like it's just kind of too long and easily to mask out the gun sound each other by themselves. So that's why like we try to make each sounds, especially the loud part, which is the impact part, as sharp as possible. Then so we made a pretty kind of impactful sound without spending too much time not to mess up the mixing. So our sound designers try to make pretty much all the sounds, especially around the sandbox and the combat related sound, as sharp as possible across all gun sound and with fire and impact and everything. Try to make it sharp and clear. Then like try to making the sound mixing much cleaner. So I couldn't kind of share all the approaches today, but so just kind of sharing the 2 of the example. But just kind of, so back then, like our direction for Halo Infinite was it's game focus, impactful and clear audio feedback, and to make the combat itself immersive.
Thank you. That's really fascinating to see how that process evolved for you all over the course of all these games that you've been working on there. Next topic I wanted to talk about. So I think many people assume that if you're making a sci-fi game, all the sounds for it need to be created digitally. But your team did very extensive field recordings of a wide array of sounds for this game, Halo Infinite. Let's take a few minutes to just watch some of the behind the scenes videos showing some of the sounds you all recorded for Halo Infinite. I'll share my screen over here. All right. Well, I was so inspired seeing all this and incredible outside the box creative thinking, just even how you all came to create these. I have a lot of questions. I guess my first one is, when you go into these recording sessions, do you bring detailed lists of what you're hoping to record and where these will ultimately be in the game, or how do you approach these recording sessions?
Yeah, so kind of the first main thing we try to do is try to identify any pain points that we can try to alleviate when having to create like large batches of content. So one of the main things we did on Infinite was did like a really extensive explosion recordings. We spent about 5 days in a desert recording many different types of explosives, different sizes and different environments. And that was just really beneficial because we had a very diverse palette that we can build all of our explosions, because Halo has just an incredible amount of explosions. And of course, you could just like, you could use library content and do some creative recording to make all of these, but you're probably going to have some kind of some spots that are going to be kind of hard to kind of pull that all together, and possibly some consistency issues. And then we also have like, you know, close, mid, far perspectives for each explosion. And it can be kind of challenging to kind of have very believable, realistic perspectives when you're just kind of crafting all that through just existing content that you have. So this really kind of allowed us to get kind of a really robust set that kind of really kind of had true sense of spatial depth to it. Then probably second is we really try to look out for things that would lend themselves to being used as like textures, or being able to lend itself very well to processing stuff that would be very useful kind of further down the line. That's why we do a lot of like rockets and thruster recordings, because there's always that in our game. And then probably the last thing is probably one of the most important, is about just trying to learn, you know, and just trying to just constantly get better. And there's nothing better than going out there and just getting that kind of like real world data and just hearing how these sounds, you know, emit and propagate in the real world. And so, yeah, I think, you know, it's just a lot of times just about having fun, and it's also just really great morale event for us all going out and just kind of coming together and getting some awesome, exciting content.
Yeah, like a lot of it is exploration. I spent a lot of times at like thrift stores and Home Depot looking for different sounds. And anytime I start to like do a set of sounds, I make a list of what I need, what I can get, what I need to synthesize, or what I have available to me. And then I kind of go from there. And like stuff like the grapple hook, I got that. I didn't know how to do that sound. And then I went for a walk with Jomo one day to clear my head, and we went to Value Village, and I found like a retractable clothesline, and I was able to get long textures that I could use for that sound. So it was really useful. On the bigger sessions, we tend to sync ahead of time. So like I did a vehicle session with Jomo, and it was really to gather source for him. And I was more of a support. So I kind of met ahead of time with him, established what he was looking for, what perspectives he wanted, what mics we should use. And we kind of came up with a detailed plan ahead of time. So we were able to get success and get the source sounds that he wanted on the field. And I was able to like know what I was listening for and make sure I was trying to optimize what we were getting.
That's amazing. And there's such a wide array of these types of recordings you all did, which I imagine required a ton of creativity and planning. What sorts of happy surprises or accidents did you encounter while conducting these recording sessions?
Yeah, like I think anytime you go to a recording session, you can like prepare a lot for it, but there's always going to be a sense of randomness. Like you might get to the location where you're going to record guns, and there might be loud birds, or there might be winds going off and stuff like that. So you really got to like optimize what you're trying to get and think outside the box and capture more sounds than you need. So like sometimes when, you know, life throws you lemons, you make lemonade with it. So like a good example is we went to a water explosion session in California where Kyle had found this abandoned school that had several different buildings in it. And we had the day off because the winds were so strong that we couldn't really record water explosions in a controlled environment. So Jomo and I decided to explore the abandoned buildings and capture all sorts of textures like winds and wind blowing through trees, wind blowing through windows, that kind of stuff, ambient metal rattles. The owner of the facility actually took a chance to like mess with us too. And as we were recording in the gymnasium, he played like this mysterious sound out of the speakers, and Jomo and I were just by ourselves, and we were like, oh my God, are we gonna die? Like, is that a ghost? Like, and the owner loved it. You could tell he was smiling after we came out because he's like, oh, anything interesting happen in there? It's a funny little experience for sure.
That's amazing. Yeah, it sounds like you guys, yeah, took some interesting risks and also just like approached challenges and still recorded some cool stuff in spite of the challenges that would get thrown at you.
Another real lucky one we had, actually, just to mention it. Robbie mentioned that vehicle recording session that we did, and yeah, we ended up renting out an airport runway in California for a couple of days. And so intermittently, you'd have to take a short break just if there was a plane landing or taking off. It would happen, you know, maybe like 3 times a day. And one of the interruptions actually ended up being a Black Hawk helicopter that just turned up and started doing drills in front of our recording gear. And it was there for like an hour straight, just literally strafing back and forth in front of us, going at distance, close range. And so we just kept all our recorders running. And yeah, it wasn't, you know, that's not something that we needed in the game necessarily, but yeah, you don't waste an opportunity like that. So
there were also jets. There was a guy that owned a jet at that airport, and he took off and did flybys past us, and we were waiting to record cars, and it was just like, it was a dream experience.
That's incredible.
Want to add to that?
Oh yeah, I mean, one thing that really comes to my mind in terms of like happy accidents. A while back, me and Robbie, we built a potato cannon. We were wanting to record like a launcher source, and so we were putting in like the propellant, and we went to go shoot it, but the back capsule wasn't completely screwed on, so it misfired and blew the cap off. And so as the gas was expelling, it created this crazy kind of like vroom, vroom, and it was just like such an interesting, unexpected sound. And that ended up becoming, you know, kind of some of the source I ended up using on the fuel rod cannon, I believe.
Yeah, I'd just like to take that opportunity to say that we always take safety precautions whenever we do this stuff, and misfires don't happen too often.
I'm so glad. So you guys are all still survive right now. Thank you, goodness.
Definitely crossed my mind when watching some of these videos, but I mean, it seemed like controlled risks, not out of control.
Yeah, it's definitely a controlled environment for sure. So don't try it at home, and always take safety precautions.
Absolutely. One thing that definitely has blown me away in these games, especially in Infinite, is are the UI sounds that you all have made for the game. How does your team go about creating UI sounds within the Halo games and Halo universe?
yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So we've got, if you think about like the broad range of UI sounds that there are, we've got a lot of different use cases and scenarios where they play. So we could have like, you know, main menu sounds or pause menu sounds, right? General navigation. We could have sounds that need to play during gameplay. So, you know, HUD-based sounds, things like, you know, when the player's switching grenades or receiving an objective, perhaps they're getting a kill medal in MP. That would be like another category. We have like UI sounds that play when you pick up specific collectibles in campaign. And we have like a whole player progression system as well. So we need sounds associated with, you know, collecting XP, leveling up, these kind of things. So the areas that I was responsible for, I actually worked largely with outsourcers on this, so I can't necessarily talk exactly about how the sounds were created, but I can talk about the direction that we provided and kind of the framework that we approached that direction with. So for something like the front end, right, the main menu sounds, I kind of started off in a place where I would basically make a note of like every action that the player could take. So, you know, you'd start just by like being like, okay, they can scroll around, they can tab between menus, they can move forward in the menu, move backwards, they can equip customization items, they can buy things in our in-game shop. They might get an error prompt if they don't have enough money to buy something in the in-game shop, all these kind of like broad brushstroke actions. And then what that allowed me to do when I had those all on paper was basically assign like an importance score. So if you imagine like a spectrum of importance with least important to most important, I could effectively map all of the sounds to somewhere on that spectrum. And so an example of a less important sound would be something like a scrolling sound, right? It's there to provide like tactile feedback for the player, but it's not supposed to be a particularly attention grabbing sound. And it's not, you know, it can be spammed very easily by the player, so there's no cost to it. On the other end of the spectrum, you'd have something like making a purchase in the shop. That's a much more meaningful moment for the player. There is a cost associated with it. They are spending, you know, units in game, and yeah, basically like mapping out all these sounds. What it allowed me to do with our outsourcers was build a very clear hierarchy. So everything that was less important basically had a specific rule set, right? So they would have to be very short sounds. They couldn't be too detailed or too characterful. Like they could have synthetic tonal elements, but they needed to be really, really simple. And they would generally be like quite low impact. And I always had in my mind that they would be quite low in the mix, right? They're quite taking like more of a reserved space in the mix. On the other end, on the most important side, those were the sounds where we were able to play more with length, you know, adding more satisfying impacts, more description in the tail of what the sound actually is. And yeah, in general, just making them more rich and characterful and louder. So yeah, working with the outsourcers, even though I was working with multiple outsourcers on these sounds, that allowed me to establish a really clear hierarchy. And as soon as we'd established like what was the least important sound and the most important sound, everything else just needed to map in between. And so it was a really effective way of me providing feedback because I knew exactly where each sound had to lie relative to the other sounds. So that's like one example. I'll just quickly run over another one while I'm here. So I mentioned about the collectible sounds that we have in campaign. So they all actually ended up having like musical motifs associated with them when you pick them up. This was actually an idea that came from Tojima later on in our production cycle. So we were kind of in like the polish phase of development. And when you're in that part of the cycle, you generally have most of the sounds in the game set up and you can play through large portions of the game at any one time. And the goal is really to like play through the game and kind of pick out areas that might be lacking or, you know, feel a little bit underwhelming and trying to like plug some of those holes. And Tojima very rightly brought up that he felt like the collectibles didn't really feel celebratory enough. That was the phrase that kept coming up. They didn't feel like a celebration, and they didn't, you know, as a result, they maybe felt underwhelming and less addictive to the player. And what we wanted to create was something that was more addictive so that they would be encouraged to continue moving around the campaign experience and collecting all the remaining ones. And the reference Tojima kept on coming back to was the Zelda chest opening sound, right? That moment where Link opens a chest. And I think there's like two versions of it, right? Based on whether it's like a smaller chest or the main quest chests. But going down that route, we were like, oh, well, maybe this is like more of a musical motif that we need. And maybe it doesn't actually make sense for a sound designer to even handle this sound. So we ended up reaching out to one of our composers, Joel Correlitz. And Joel actually had experience doing product-based audio. Like if I remember correctly, I think he'd done some stingers for like Ford in the past. So he kind of had, you know, he was the right person for this kind of work. And really all we had to do was give him like thematic keywords for each collectible. And then he would go away, spin up a load of drafts. We would sync once or twice a week. And yeah, over a course of say like 3 or 4 weeks, we basically iterated down to a short list where we ended up with the assets that we wanted to polish. And those are the ones that you hear in game when you're picking up the collectibles. So I just kind of wanted to highlight those two because they're both UI, but they're completely different processes as far as like how we approach them.
That's really interesting. Yeah, thank you. So obviously this is Halo is a series where, you know, the main character, Master Chief, or others are traversing the environment quite a bit. Robbie, I think you spoke to the grappling sounds. But as far as like more basic sounds, what's your process for creating Foley for these games?
Oh, well, I'm going to try to keep this one short, but it's probably going to be a long-winded answer. we have roughly 10 characters in our game, and each one of them can have between 500 to 1,000 different animations. And in order to cover that amount of animations, we developed a granular system in Halo 5. The goal of it was to like look back at Halo 4 and all the mistakes we made and come up with a system that was smarter and covered the animations, and it was a little bit more flexible. So the real goal was like cover thousands of animations without blowing out our memory or crunching on content. React to animation changes later on without having to do content revisions, and utilize an outsourced Foley stage rather than one of us spending the entire production doing sound design for the characters. So what we did was, this is for non-locomotion sounds. Locomotion sounds are like walk, run, sprint, slide, shuffle. But this is more for movements that the characters do in game. We created a library of sounds that we use on all the animations, and it's made up of several small actions that could be tagged to animations. So for example, push, pull, arm swing fast, arm swing slow, body jerk, that kind of stuff. Each character has about 50 different actions that the implementers can then tag to the animations as they're working. When content wise, we try to make sure each sound kind of communicates the action and the intensity, and that they work well going from one to the other, and they're dynamic and they're not just like a wall of sound. When we start a new character, usually I temp the sounds out. So I'll create a library from either source I have or a different character I might use as a temp sound. And I make all the sounds and I give it to the implementers, and they start tagging the animations early on, because animations are usually ready in different stages in production. And usually they start pretty early. So they start tagging all the animations with my temp sounds. I try to make sure they're really representative of what the actions would be and what the kind of sound I'm looking for is. When we're ready to go to the Foley stage, I have the ability to export an Excel sheet, and that Excel sheet has a list of all the animations and what sounds are tagged to them. So I can use that list to generate a Pro Tools session for the Foley artists, where I know what game captures or play blasts I need to put in there. So I start making a session, I put some markers down, and I put the temp sounds in so the Foley artists can reference those things. And then we go to the stage and we perform all the sounds. So the Foley artists, we actually do 3 passes per action with 3 different props. We use a prop that kind of sounds low frequency wise, one that sounds mid frequency wise, and one that sounds high frequency wise, so that the sound designer or editor has room to really design a sound that works. You know, they might not use all the different props, or they might use all of them for the bigger movements type of thing. When we're done at the stage, we bring it back and we do a content swap, and we adjust the implementation if it needs to be adjusted. But most of the time we try to perform the actions very close to the temp sounds, so little iteration is kind of needed. So we designed that in Halo 5, and it kind of worked so well that we decided to keep it, and we decided to make some changes from Halo 5 to Halo Infinite. Some to follow Tajin's direction of being more impactful and being more deliberate with our sounds. So like in Halo 5, we were so excited about the system that we over-tagged animations, and it was a very big wall of sounds for the player and for non-players and stuff like that. So Tajin wanted me to clean it up a little bit. So I went back and I revised all the content that we had and simplified it and shortened it a bit. And then the implementers actually took a different approach and tagged it a little bit more deliberately, and didn't try to cover every action, but just cover the important ones. Besides that, we also had the ability to take some extra time and explore different options. So I went through for Halo Infinite and got a Team Alliance RTPC that allowed me to have different footsteps for enemies versus teammates, even though they're using the same character in MP, and that actually gives a lot of feedback back to players, so we can tune enemy footsteps differently. And that was a real challenging thing for sure, because pro players have a lot of opinions about footsteps, and well, everybody has opinions on footsteps, it turns out. And so that was one of the things we learned. And also, we also developed the ability to procedurally tag animations with footsteps. So in Halo 4 and 5, we had to manually tag footstep sounds to animations. And in Halo Infinite, we were lucky enough to stumble upon some tech that allowed us to procedurally generate it based off of the way the foot interacts with the animation. A nice dev came up with that for us. We added some other bells and whistles like a movement timer so that Foley could change if the player's been running for a certain amount of time. And we also explored other creative uses for the Foley, like, for example, when you do active camo, it mutes the player's footsteps, so they're a little bit more sneaky, and it adds a little bit of advantage to that in the soundscape so that it can actually help players get more kills. Couple other things we added, some nice detail stuff that Tajin had an idea for that we explored was when you run through bushes, getting a sound to work for that. That was actually a huge improvement to our experience, especially for the open world. A lot of thanks to Chase Thompson, who worked really hard with some audio devs to come up with that, and I just had to make the content for it. And also we added a system that as you went on steep cliffs, because there's a lot of those in the open world, we added like rock debris kind of plays off of your footsteps, and it kind of makes the world a little bit more immersive. Lastly, I'll touch on cinematic Foley. That was done the usual way. We usually make a lot of sessions. Kyle usually leads that and I support. It was real interesting to do that during COVID because we had to do it remote, but because of Warner Brothers and Skywalker, they were great partners. They had a lot of tools that allowed us to listen to the sounds easily. And it was pretty, it was almost like a simpler approach to actually going down there. You know, it wasn't a complete replacement to be in there, but definitely worked really well for us. And yeah, I really enjoyed the experience. And that's pretty much how our Foley system works. Yep.
It's fascinating. Yeah, thank you for taking us through that. Halo is such a vast universe, which obviously means there's a wide array of environments throughout Halo Infinite in particular. How do you go about building the background ambiences for all of the locations that we see in the game?
I can take that one. So yeah, so we've got a couple of like core categories of ambient sounds. We have bass airs, and so these are like our, you know, essentially our quad noise floors that kind of underpin each space, sorry, with a very simple room tone or wind tone. They're not really supposed to have any sort of detail in Infinite. That's a very big difference between what we did in 5 and Infinite. We rely much more on 3D positional emitters to kind of sell all of the detail in any one space. And so yeah, the second category are those positionals. So they provide detail for visual features, and also sometimes we're doing like audio specific storytelling that has no visual counterpart. So I can talk a bit about campaign ambiences and how we went about creating them. Our campaign has like a large open world, and it has a lot of interior dungeon spaces that are essentially like end-to-end levels. For the open world elements, we had to create create assets for the following categories. So we had wildlife, wind interactables, water, banished interiors, and then miscellaneous sets. So going back to wildlife, we have heard but not seen animals. And those need to play dynamically based on the time of day in the game. So we have to create sets of sounds for morning, afternoon, dusk, and nighttime. And those all have to mix dynamically and play back dynamically based on what the time of day is. Those can be broken down into birds, mammals, amphibians, and insects. And this is done on a per map basis. So like there's one section of open world that has a specific suite for all those times of day. There's a second section that has a completely different suite. And then there's a third section that also has its own unique suite. So quite a lot of content to cover there. The other aspect of wildlife that we had to cover was also flock audio. So flocks is our kind of internal name for animals that actually are seen, right? They have a physical animals that occupy the game space, and they can be interacted with. So they have like AI behaviors where they can just be passively moving around. They can be doing special animations. They can be being intimidated by the player, or you can even kill them. So we have to like go into a lot of detail there with those sound sets. For the wind category, we have to cut base airs, and we also cut wind gust sweeteners. So these are like randomized one-shots that can play on top of the base air that give it more life and variety. And it's actually a really important aspect of our system, because one thing that we did for Infinite was we introduced this concept of wind interactables. So basically we use the wind gust sweeteners, we do envelope tracking on them, and we use them to drive the volume of many other sounds that you hear in the environment. So what I mean by that, as a simple example, would be if you're stood out in open world and you happen to be stood next to a tree, when you hear these wind gusts come in, the envelope actually drives the rustling of the tree in sympathy live frame to frame. And that's happening across many positionals across open world. So you've got that happening on trees, on grass, reeds. If you're stood on a dirt road, you'll hear like debris scattering along the way. And this is all driven with its own internal audio system. It doesn't rely on anything else. It's a pretty neat system. It's one of the things I'm most proud of that we did in the ambient section of the game, because it basically just like glues all of our elements together in a really cool and like natural feeling way. And then we have to cut assets for water. So we had rivers and streams of different sizes, lakes, hot springs, waterfalls of multiple sizes. We have to cut assets for the banished interiors. So these were all these outposts that were placed all over Zeta Halo. And so we kind of contrast those as, you know, because they're banished, they have a more industrial feel. So you kind of go from these natural sounds into these more industrial areas where the banished have taken up camp. And those are all implemented via kits. So kits was a new thing for Infinite as well, where we can basically associate a sound with like a template version of a thing. And then everywhere that thing is used, it will play that audio. So rather than needing to go across the whole game and manually place all of these things, we kind of have that working for us. And then, yeah, the sixth category would be miscellaneous. And so that would be, you know, like atmospheric things like metal creaks, pangs, distant rock tumbles, sounds for VFX support. So we have to do stuff for like every time you go, if you walk over to like a chasm in Zeta Halo, you'll see like lightning underneath. And so we have to create sounds for things of that scale. We pretty much have to create sounds for like the sounds of moths scattering around spotlights. So it goes like all the way from massive scale to tiny scale, and we do everything in between. So let me just get through my notes here. Yeah, so a lot of these sounds can be obtained through, you know, field recording out in the Pacific Northwest. We have a lot of nature on our doorstep, and so some of the sound sets, yeah, can be obtained by ourselves relatively easily, just by going out for like a day or two into a remote location. A core part of our ambience that we weren't able to record everything ourselves was actually wildlife. We had talked at one point during our production cycle about like potentially going to somewhere like Galapagos and like spending a week out there and trying to record as much, you know, alien sounding wildlife as possible. It didn't really work out timing wise. And so we ended up reaching out to a field recordist who's based out of Australia, Mark Anderson. He specializes in recording a lot of exotic wildlife in hard to reach locations, which was perfect for our needs, right? Because we kind of need these naturally alien sounding wildlife. So it's a good starting place to start with. And so, yeah, so he basically curated a custom library for us based on all of our specific needs and all of the stuff that we needed across all the different times of day. And in some cases, those recordings were like weird enough where you didn't even have to do anything to them. They just fit an alien vibe very clearly without too much editing. Other ones, we kind of did more pitch modulation to kind of create new, say like birdsong out of an existing birdsong. And yeah, I think it works pretty well in the end. Kind of makes those things feel less familiar and just gives them like a slight alien vibe, makes them feel more unique. The last part I'll touch on for ambience is for campaign is probably the surfacing graph system. So because the landmass is so enormous, like the scope of open world is enormous, we don't really have time to go and place manual placements everywhere. So we actually utilized a tool that was created by some devs that essentially what it does is it looks at the terrain in open world, and based on certain rule sets, it can automatically place positionals for you of different categories. So for example, it can identify a body of water. And so then it knows, okay, this is a lake. I'm going to place lake lapping positionals with this kind of interval in this area. And I'm also going to place amphibian sounds around the bank of this body of water. And I know this area is mostly grass and I know there's trees on it. So I'm going to be placing more randomized birds. And it kind of does that across the full scale of our campaign open world. And the really neat thing about that system is that it doesn't really require any maintenance from us, right? Like if environment artists have to make a change based on design needs, they can go and make that change. All we have to do is run this tool, and then it will automatically shift all of the positionals around to where they need to be. I could actually do a quick screen share real quick. Yeah, cool. So this is, you can see what the surfacing graph is actually doing here. So each of these color of positionals represent a different category of sound. And so I forget exactly which ones are which. I think the orange ones might be birds. The blue ones are obviously lake laps. So you're looking at a bird's eye view of like AA Island, I think this is. And then at more distant intervals, it's placing positionals for like grass rustles and crickets. And it's basically, yeah, you can see it just runs this. We just run this prompt and then it will place positionals like this. So it was a really handy tool to have during production, saved us a lot of headache, and we'll probably be expanding on it in the future.
That's really amazing. Yeah, that's quite a fascinating tool. One quick thing I just wanted to add in, a couple of people have mentioned that Tajin would ask for something on the team. I just wanted to clarify, Tajin is Sotaro Tojima here, the audio director. They're the same person. Just want to clarify that.
Before we move on, I'd love to add to the ambience talk real quick.
Yeah, please do.
Just to provide MP perspective as well. It's a little different on MP than it is from campaign because we have a more controlled sizable map. So we could go and we do that a little bit more manual. So we don't automate as much stuff and we manually place stuff. But the trade-off in that is that you kind of have different diverse environments. Like for example, we have a city at night where you have to figure out like what the nightlife of Halo would sound like, or a hydroelectric plant, or a nature scene with a forerunner structure in it. And we usually, what we do for that is we attend art reviews for the maps early on, so we know what to expect and build relationships with teams and kind of request what we need. And then we meet with implementers and they actually like manually place stuff, and we can kind of geek out a little bit more on scripted sounds. One good example is like in the map streets, there's a whole sequence of sounds that play that have no relation to any visuals, but it's in a subway station and you hear a chime go off letting you know that a subway is on its way. Then you hear like a subway approaching, and we placed some emitters by some grates and some gates, and they kind of rattle as it kind of peaks. And it's just like fun little moments like that that we can create. Or we have a scripted arcade machine that we work with the music team to like put sounds on, so we can geek out a little bit more. It's a little bit more manual, and you are a little bit dependent on if they change stuff, but it's a difference that we have to kind of account for, as well as BTB maps with giant guns that go off alerting players about progress within the map, within their game, and how it changes stuff that happens on the map, kind of thing.
Very interesting. Halo has always been a franchise with a rich, deep story as well. How do you all go about recording actors for these games? Do you record as much as possible on mocap stages, or have any particular methods for recording actors?
Yeah, definitely. We do try to record as much on the mocap stage if we're recording actual performance, and there's dialogue to go along with it. And we'll do that. We'll utilize the DPA 48.8 headset. But then there also is a huge amount of dialogue that's done in the actual VO booth. I think for Infinite, we had around about 50,000 lines of dialogue total. So it's quite a bit. And then you definitely got a bit convoluted in the production of Infinite because of the pandemic. We were kind of in the thick of it during that. And we had to get really creative about how we worked with our artists. Sometimes we would just send out our equipment to them and they could use in their home studios. Others, they would have just their own kit that we'd have to utilize. And then we'd have to, just put a little bit more emphasis in editorial to just try to do as much matching as possible. Because when we're in the booth as well, we also use the DPA 4088. So we just have a very consistent dialogue profile across the game for all characters. And then like one of the cool things we did, I would arrange time at the end of mocap sessions to sit down with Jen Taylor, who's the actress for Cortana. And in our game, there's these dungeons where we'll have these like areas where Cortana left all these messages for Chief. And they're supposed to be just kind of like ghostly. And so I would go there and I'd bring the Neumann KU100 binaural dummy head and also an ambisonic mic. And I'd have her perform the lines around the mic and she would walk around and move in and out and just kind of give it this really nice, natural, like kind of spatial feeling and just really cool kind of panning between all the different channels. And so then I'd also have her do different reads. So I'd have her do like a very like breathy, whispery take, a very overly emotional and a normal read. Then I can splice between all those and the editorial. And then I pretty much leaned heavily on the binaural set, but then I would send the ambisonic mic into like just kind of like more spatial processing and just have that in the rears. Our original goal was to have like real-time ambisonics processing, so you could be able to get like different height cues, but it just kind of became just a bit too much in terms of just getting that all worked out. So we just went with a bake approach.
Very nice. And then also on the topic of dialogue, how do you all go about manipulating dialogue to make human voices sound more like creatures or AI or sound like it's through the helmet of a soldier, or et cetera?
Yeah, for processing, we really try to keep it very minimal for the most part, because the one thing we don't ever want to do is to make it challenging for you to understand what their character is saying at any given moment. And we also don't want to take away from the actor's performance. And so we did try in the past many times to try to do like helmet processing for like Spartans, but we ended up finding it just kind of was just a bit too muffled, and you would end up just kind of always kind of straining to hear what they said. And so we just pretty much just keep that completely clean. For like certain AI characters, like your brutes and your elites, grunts, it is pretty simple what we do with that, because we also want to kind of stay in line with like Bungie done in the past. And so it's usually just kind of a few semitones down or a few semitones up. And so you could still be able to kind of hear what they're saying very clearly, because especially because all those characters, they usually say a lot of like really kind of funny, interesting lines. And then for kind of like AI robot type stuff, we'll do some processing of like harmonizers or chorusing and flanger. And usually we'll use that just like in Wise as like real-time plug-in processing. That way localization doesn't have to do all that stuff by hand, and it just kind of like alleviates a lot of that tedious work that they would have to do. Because for our game, we support like 13 languages. So it's just kind of a lot of dialogue all up. And then for creatures, that's definitely, I think from a sound design perspective, that's like the most intensive process there is. Because for our game, you have, for any creature type character, you'll have anywhere from like 20 to 40 AI states that you have to cover. So that's stuff like, oh, if they're surprised or angry, frustrated, etc. And then you need to have variations for each of those states. And so you're just having to create a lot of content that you have to conceptualize completely from scratch, because you're basically creating your own dialect. And so, a lot of times you might just go in and you might start with your own voice to be able to create kind of like a foundation that you can build upon. Or you can even just use that to kind of drive other parameters like envelopes turning on and off, closing and opening filters. And then a lot of times you'll be taking tons of different recordings from different animals and layering those on top. but that can be really challenging because taking a bunch of different source material, you really have to be careful about trying to blend that so it kind of sounds just like it's coming from one cohesive source. And then like you could also do a lot of cool stuff like with synthesis, like playing around with feedback loops, short delay lines, forming filters. One of my favorite things of doing is like taking actual physical objects and manipulating them with like either like rubber friction mallets or taking bows or using like a daxophone. You could get just like a lot of interesting vocal like qualities from just everyday sounds. Yeah.
That's really cool. I have one more question and then I'd love to open it up to some audience questions. Feel free everyone to ask questions in the chat and we'll try to get to as many as we can with the audio team here. But I wanted to ask also, you all have spoken in prior interviews about classic hero sounds in the Halo universe. So I just was curious, how do you all go about expanding upon sounds that players already know really well? Have you encountered challenges with that, and how do you sort of approach sweetening those to modern audio standards?
So, I mean, one of the big things we really kind of set down and did was like really try to analyze what had kind of like the most emotional, nostalgic kind of factor for players. And so what can we kind of bring back and just kind of have a very high impact? One of the most recognizable ones is the shield recharge. So we definitely wanted to just kind of bring that back in because it's just so recognizable. And we also wanted to kind of try to bring back some of the recognizable weapons that were from the past. A lot of the weapons in Halo Infinite, they're all completely new, but we do have some returning ones like the Needler and the plasma pistol. And when we originally set out these designs, we did something completely different because I kind of feel our like sci-fi aesthetic is very grounded. But these ones are kind of a bit different and have a kind of different tonal balance than what all our other weapons kind of sound like. And so we kind of had to go back to the drawing board and try to really think about reincorporating those elements that are recognizable that players can then be able to latch on to. So yeah, the plasma pistol and Needler, those are probably the two that we really put a lot of forth of time to try to get it somewhat closer to some of the legacy assets.
Yeah, you have to respect the sound or else the fans will let you know. And they're very vocal about what they like. So it's important to respect that.
Absolutely, yeah, especially with such a huge iconic franchise that there are so many fans of everywhere for so many years. All right, well, let's jump into some audience questions. Looks like we have one from Ivan. What kind of mics are those recording the Xbox that was in that first video that we played back earlier?
Yeah, those are LOM Electro Slulches. I can't pronounce it, but it's made by LOM, LOM microphones. You can find it by Googling that. They make great microphones. They're cheaper alternatives that I really like because you can take more risks with your microphones. I have a lot of more expensive microphones, but I tend to not use them in the field as much because you're kind of worried about breaking them. LOM makes some really nice Omni mics that I really like called Uzi Pros, and their micro Uzis are a nice option too, paired with like a D100 or a Roland RO7. The Electro Slulch or whatever it's called is an EMF mic. The first time I ever heard of an EMF mic, Kyle actually made one, and we were recording in Tasmania together, and he made it from a guitar pickup.
Yeah.
It was very sketchy looking, and I was like, I remember walking down the streets of Tasmania, and I'm like, what are people gonna think about this person with like a guitar pickup taped to a wire? But it sounded amazing. It does require a lot of noise reduction to pull out those sounds. So what you heard in the video from the Xbox, it was noise reduced and it was processed through a Kima. So it doesn't come out of the box for that sound, but like it does give you a tool that you can kind of experiment with and pull really unique sounds out of if you dig through the recordings you get.
I was very curious about that, how natural that was. That just out of curiosity, how did you go like discover those sounds came out of an Xbox? Like what kinds of experimentation led you to that?
That was actually I really wanted to just do like, again, we go back to like sound design and messing around and experimenting with stuff. And that was one of those things where me and a couple of buddies wanted to like experiment. I had just moved and I had boxes of hard drives and boxes of game consoles. And so I was like, okay, let's record with the Electro Sludge and see what we get. And we just got some really wild stuff. Like I think we recorded for hours that day and got a lot of detailed sounds and stuff like that from all the different things. And then I gave it over to Kyle, and Kyle did some process. And a lot of it is accurate to what you kind of hear, though. I did some recently. I think like I go back and record game consoles with that thing like every year. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, it's going to be different, and it's good to experiment and see what you get, kind of thing.
That's amazing. I think it's so cool that it was an Xbox of all consoles and not off-brand or anything like that.
Yeah, it was a happy accident.
We took those mics to a computer museum in Seattle one time as well, actually. That ended up being because it was basically a museum that they'd archived all of these computers from over the decades. And we managed to get private access one day. And yeah, we just spent like 3 hours walking around the halls, like going up to different machinery and waving around these tools. We got some interesting stuff.
It's important to say too, like sometimes you just got to ask, right? Like that's how we got the computer museum. We just asked and they were like, oh, sure, that sounds awesome. I actually had an incident today where I went to the gym and I was buying something there, and the person that worked there was like, hey, is that a Halo shirt? And I started talking to him, and he's like, okay, I'm going to talk to my manager, see if you all can come by and record. So like, it's a lot of like, Kyle does a lot of it, actually. Kyle definitely goes out and asks a lot of people if we can record and get these great opportunities for us. But you never know until you ask.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's one of the kind of cool things with kind of networking is because, we're super passionate and love recording. And then you end up finding these people that have their own niches and hobbies, and they want to share it with you, and so it kind of creates this symbiotic relationship. And yeah, it's always fun.
That's how we got into the controller testing facility to do all those recordings too. And going back to the computer museum thing, we got that Fallout like computer text sound. I remember that from one of the screens that were just printing up text slowly. It was a great sound, kind of thing. Sorry, I could go off for hours about that.
Oh, it's amazing. We have a question from Kevin. What's the most dangerous recording session that you guys have done?
Theramite. It's got to be Theramite, right?
I don't know. We've done a lot of sketchy stuff.
Yeah, Thermite was pretty sketch. I mean, it was safe. It was safe because we did it. We did it like kind of in a body of water, essentially. So, we had precautions at hand, but, that stuff burns, I think, northward of 5,000 degrees. So
yeah, you can't stop it once it goes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I would say like the explosion session, we were launching barrels in the air and one of the barrels burst and parts went flying. Fortunately, it was super safe and we were in a good distance away and nothing was dangerous, but
Yeah, so everyone was safe, but like I lost my window shield with the explosion session. Right.
Yeah, the pressure of the air passing down.
Yeah, the shockwave.
Then the shockwave actually cracked Tajin's windshield. We were recording. What were the types of explosions we were recording?
I think it was Deadport.
Yeah, and we also did C4.
Anfo, C4.
Yeah. Obviously, we didn't do it. We hired a professional that handles these every day or as a lot. So we had nothing to do with it. And in sessions like this, it's important to say we are always super far away. And we run stakes that go 1,000 feet that take the mics closer to it, but we are always paying attention to safety precautions. And we have a safety officer on site every time.
Oh, the alkyne metals were kind of sketch as well.
Yes, those were super sketch.
We did a huge like chemical reaction session. And so when you put alkyne metals in water, it becomes reactive and it'll just start exploding.
Hey, what is it actually called, the alkyne metals?
You'll have like potassium, sodium, stuff like that.
And the way we came about it was kind of sketch too, because me and you actually experimented on our own first in a controlled environment, obviously, and then eventually we hired a professional to do it for us.
The microwave as well.
Yeah, the microwave sketch. Yeah, I would not recommend any of you try that.
All of Peter's homemade electric devices.
Yes,
and
we have an
stuff.
engineer that actually is a huge Halo fan, and he makes stuff for us sometimes. He made he set up the rocket session, and the rocket session could have been safer, but yeah, he did that, and he made a device for us that was pretty much like a microwave without a door. But we're far away.
It was also great because he modded it so it had like very to no noise floor whatsoever. So
Yeah,
it was really
the
cool.
hum was gone.
Yeah.
So we could actually focus on getting the electrical elements in there. And he also did some other stuff with electricity that was just wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, cool.
We had a question from Akimov. That stationary rocket turrets that many enemies are using have just one sound sample per shooting. But for such a big game, how large of sample variations are used?
Yeah, you
Yeah.
want to start with that? I'll touch on it too.
Yeah, definitely. For something like that, we would usually, so for like a rocket turret firing, for example, you would have multiple perspectives. So you'd have like close, mid, far, and then we also have unique tails for each weapon as well. And so for each of those sets, we'd usually have around like about 6 to 8 variations or so. But it's definitely different if it's like an automatic weapon because we break down all the individual shots essentially into like grains. And so you'll have anywhere from 12 to 16 per those. But then you're also making all the sets for the different environment types as well. Like we'll support 5 different acoustic environments. So an exterior, reflective, interior, small, medium, and large. And so that also gives you this whole extra set of variety that you can have.
And I'll add to it too that I think that variation is kind of a tool as well.
Mhm.
So, and it actually, you have to pay close attention to it because if you're doing a gun like Kyle does or footsteps, the variations can't be too far off or the player will notice it, right? So it kind of has to meld together. So they have to be pretty similar. But if you want to make a sound, I do this a lot with MP mode sounds, and Tajin taught me this quite a bit with that stuff, is like if you want players to recognize something for something to feel iconic to them, I actually use less variations in that situation. So because I want them to recognize that sound and learn what that means. So for example, when you steal the flag and the alert goes off and it goes beep, 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 that is kind of one variation that plays, and it's because in a battle there's a lot of stuff going on. We need to make sure that the player can hear that stuff, so we actually are bold enough to not put a variation on everything, which I think took a while for me to get comfortable with, but it really works. And when I started in the industry, a lot of people kept on giving me revisions I really want an iconic sound, and I really didn't understand what they meant by that. And now I kind of understand that it's something that players can recognize and learn and relate to, kind of thing. And sometimes that comes with one variation rather than complicating it. And the communication, it's about communication, so you don't want to overcomplicate it.
We have a question from Kushal. What kind of mix did you guys do, like binaural or Dolby or stereo? I guess what's the final format or highest level format that you guys are mixing the games to?
So basically, Halo Infinite covered the stereo and Windows Sonic, which is a spatial audio in a Windows platform, Xbox as well, and also 5.171 and Dolby Atmos. So that's the kind of coverage. So we cover the pretty kind of wide variety of format. But to be honest, so our main focus for Halo Infinite was actually stereo and Windows Sonic. So for Halo Infinite, we establishing a whole system and a content from scratch. And so for Halo Infinite, we really wanted to achieve a really strong, compelling audio experience, at least towards the most popular format first. which is stereo user, so, we are audio lover, so definitely we love to spend a time towards a 7.1 or Dolby Atmos, definitely. So definitely my room has a ceiling speaker as well, but just kind of prioritize wise. So we focus on the stereo and the Windows Sonic first. Windows Sonic is like a spatial audio, but like everyone can experience the spatial audio without any extra cost. Just kind of using your earpod or headphone to your controller, and immediately it should work as soon as switching off, turning off the Windows Sonic feature. And so Dolby Atmos headphone as well, and a DTS X as well. So for these kind of special things is the second priority, because everyone can enjoy it without any extra cost. So that's why, so our sound is calculated as a 3D position. So that's why, so definitely you can hear the enemy's gun sound from above through the Dolby Atmos. That kind of things, everything works as a spatial, but we didn't spend much time to make it something really unique and fun for Dolby Atmos or 7.1 yet for Infinite. So this is something like we hopefully can kind of spend more time and enjoy more for next project.
We have a question from Hakil. What are the processes that you use to conserve memory, especially with ambience is not sounding too monotonous?
I can touch on that a bit, and then Jomo might have some additional stuff to touch on. Tech has definitely changed from Halo 4 to Halo Infinite. Halo 4, we had to worry about memory a lot, and we had to be very deliberate about stuff, because I think we had like 24 megs in total. Halo Infinite, we have about 300. I think, and Halo 5 had about 300 too. There was a huge change in memory usage across all games, probably in the industry, when places left like 360 and stuff like that, and went to like Xbox One and also PlayStation to PlayStation, or PlayStation 3 to PlayStation 4. There was probably a huge bump on their end too. So we don't have to worry too much about memory, especially on Halo Infinite. I think that some of Jomo's maps, to call them out, are actually 24 megs. But we can also stream a lot. So that's another tool that we have that Chase Thompson, our lead technical sound designer, actually pulls sometimes and uses. So we have a lot of options to do that on, and we can be a lot more, creative with how we approach stuff. I think like a positional loop in Halo 4 had to be about 2 to 3 seconds. And trying to get detail on that is super hard and challenging. I think my record was I had less than 2 seconds for one fire loop, and it worked, but it was like, whoa. But now Joe and I both, like when we're in memory, we like to do about 9 seconds for a sound, and we get a lot of great detail, and the quality bump is just perfect. And like we can go longer, but then we stream at that point. So we have like a kind of a cutoff agreed with Chase as to like when we can put something in memory versus when we got to stream. So if you want to make a 60-second loop, that's streaming kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't think you actually have to be that conservative anymore. It kind of makes sense to cut a decent amount of variations, and then if a problem arises, you start to scale back on the amount of variations, rather than being in a position where like you've only made like 2 variations because you were worried about memory, and then you're getting in game and you're like, this feels too repetitive. So I prefer to start from a place of going big and then kind of scaling backwards, rather than like updating as you go based on repetition, I think.
Yeah, and one thing to add too is we're not like layering too much in the game too. We're kind of being deliberate about stuff. So we are printing stuff down. Another thing besides memory you have to worry about is your voice count. and being deliberate and not over layering. Like, for example, if I'm doing a machine, I'm not going to do 3 layers for that machine. I'm actually going to do 1 and get a nice detailed sound that's longer and might transition from one loop to another. That's a trick I kind of stole from Jomo that really works well, is like if I have a machine, I might have it go through a couple loops and then it might go to a sputter loop and then kick back up again. It's kind of nice little details you can add in it. So we're being deliberate about the amount of voices because we don't want to muddy Tajian's mix, and we want to keep to his style rules that he set out ahead of time.
Amount of voices as well. It also eats up the CPU, which
Yeah.
in our current generation is a little bit more of a concern than memory usage.
Yeah, that's something we learned in Halo 5. Halo 5, we didn't have any memory issues, but we had voice count, right? So like we had to learn to dial back. And every project, that's what's nice about working on Halo, is we're always learning stuff every project, and we're being like, hey, what can we do better? And that's something that Taji and Kyle kind of instill upon us. I think every time we ship something, they kind of think about what they could do better rather than celebrate it too much. And that's a good trait because they're thinking about like how we can take it to the next stage. And that's how we kind of get a better experience each time.
I think that's actually a good point that you brought up, Robbie, because like we didn't even touch on that, right? Like part of the new direction was actually basically not using as much layering across the entire game. So that kind of brought down our memory footprint in general anyway. So we've been able to take liberties elsewhere with the amount we're using.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say like with Kyle's weapon sounds, I think in Halo 5, it was like you had like was it like a 4-layer suite for each weapon, right? For like player sounds.
I think like some guns had a 7-8 layers for just one single shot in Halo 4-5.
In Halo 4, it had about 7. I think in Halo 5, we set up some rule sets and it was like 4. And I think enemy vehicles, we actually had to take down the third-person perspective to 1. Even footsteps from Halo Infinite to Halo 5, or from Halo 5 to Halo Infinite, they used to be 2 layers. And when you think about it, 2 sounds per footstep, how often footsteps happen, that can eat up your voice count, right? Especially when you have like 40 characters on screen. It's like, wow, that's like 80 voices being eaten up right now, and your limit is 120. You got to be conservative. So we brought that down. We did a lot of cleanup, and it worked really well into given a controlled environment kind of thing. Yeah,
it's really good point, I think. Kind of since I started to work for the video game, so kind of our history is, so getting a more and more sophisticated sound, because like we started with like sounds, voice limitation about 30, so initially, so just 30 sound, while like a film and a movie post-production is using hundreds of tracks, so we wanted to make our fidelity close to a movie quality, and a 30 sound is not enough, and we try to getting more and more. And now actually Halo 5, so we played, I think about over 200 sounds one time, and we get a new generation console this time. Wow! So finally over 300. We finally getting a similar, limit as a film movie quality, but at the same time, so I feel like I started to feel the kind of limitation of the mixing and bug finding a limitation. It's like no, wait, we're trying to making a more and more layer, more sophisticated, more detailed, but I realizing that, so we cannot control everything intentionally in a great way for 300 sounds at the same time. So that's why, it's kind of like a dramatic transition from my history towards the Halo 5 and after Halo 5. Like we're trying to make it more and more and more. But like we decided kind of like a decision to scope and focusing more for important sounds. And actually, so in Halo Infinite, I think in most game experience, including some chaotic combat, like we are using about 100 sounds in average, which is like half down. And sounds feels even richer and clear and impactful. So that's why, kind of it's interesting timing. So whenever you're starting working for a new video game project, so I'm not sure, if like we should having a more detailed sound, or sometimes scoping or cutting could be sometimes works much better. So I'm definitely recommend to rethink, so how much sound you can control it to deliver the most immersive experience for game users. So that's what I feel.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear about, like just how the evolution of technology and consoles has influenced your decisions and way of organizing files. And thank you also for touching on voice count, because I think that answers a question James had here in the chat as well. We have a question from Michael, great question. As far as sound, what are you all most proud of as far as sound, as far as the advancement from since the Bungie Halo releases through these games, what you all have contributed to the franchise?
I mean, I think, me personally, I think our evolution and our mix to where we've landed on Infinite is kind of leaps and bounds of what Bungie's done in the past. Nothing to knock Bungie. I have nothing but the most respect for what they've done with the franchise before us. And then also just, yeah, the weapons as well. I feel like in previous Bungie titles, the weapons are kind of like second fiddle, and there's a lot of things like, if there's a brute talking to you, his voice is going to be louder than your weapon. But I think the evolution of, especially with our threat mixing system, it just kind of really alleviates a lot of those issues. And I think, yeah, where we kind of landed with all that is, yeah, pretty awesome.
I think it's hard to compare the two, right? Like even between Halo 4 and Halo Infinite, I mentioned the memory changes and the voice count changes and stuff like that. So like really, when you're comparing the two, you're comparing different eras of game audio, right? And so I think what Bungie did was phenomenal, and it resonates with people so much that they still crave some of that. If you read our fans' comments, and I respect that, and I respect everything they did, and I think they did a phenomenal job. Given like if Halo 4 was that hard with the memory count, imagine what they were dealing with, right? So like I think they did a phenomenal job, and it's hard to compare the two, kind of thing, really. So I don't want to say anything negative towards that, because wow, I can't even imagine how they managed to do that. And, even I have it now with people in the industry. They're like, how did you make a game with 24 megs? And I was like, oh, like, I don't know, but we did. We figured it out. And like, I think now, how did they make a game with what they had,
You all are working on obviously one of the biggest, most important franchises in games. I was just curious for each of you, how did each of your careers begin in game audio?
Kyle will start, sure.
Yeah, so I didn't really get into audio until like my very late teenage years. Kind of got just introduced into it through like music production. I was starting to kind of like learn like electronic music and just like doing things on my own, using stuff like, Cubase and Reason. And I really kind of fell in love with the more technical aspects of music production. And so I kind of wanted to learn more. And so I went to school for like audio engineering, and did some work in like recording studios. And then I quickly figured out that I don't want to do this because you don't have kind of the flexibility of who you work with. And so a lot of times you're working with musicians who can just be, very disrespectful, or you don't really respect their output. And so luckily, while I was at school, I got introduced to a little bit of post-production and sound design, and that just like sunk its teeth in me right away. Just that like combination of like creative and also technical, and that feeling of like bringing something to screen to life was just amazing. And this was kind of like right around the same time as like the next generation of consoles from the original Xbox was starting up. And so there was just a lot of excitement behind like, oh, we can make these really like high fidelity experiences now for gaming. And so I then was looking for, okay, I want to learn more about that. ended up finding a school in Vancouver Film School, which has a really great, robust game audio program there. And so did that. And luckily, once I graduated there, I ended up getting a job at Microsoft Sound Lab. And yeah, and that's basically how it all started.
Yeah, I think out of university, I didn't know what I wanted to do with life. And somebody told me about sound design, and I went to Vancouver Film School. I went for a film production, and then I went for sound design program. So I did 2 years there. I met Kyle and Noah Lothian, and I even met Jomo for a brief period of time there as well.
Another sound designer.
Daniel Ramo, lots of sound designers, and even some at Bungie too that we met there. Yeah, so I met all those people, and then I graduated, and then Kyle helped me actually transition to a job at Microsoft after a year of kind of beating my head on the pavement, doing QA, testing at EA and some other stuff. And I started at Sound Lab. I was doing lots of different games. It's kind of like an outsourcer role kind of thing. And then we met Tojima when he came here to actually start his job. It was a really cool experience, and I remember that kind of thing. And from there, I got a job at 343.
Yeah, so I guess I was into games a long time before I was into audio. But how I fell into sound design specifically, I was actually doing a music engineering course that ended up having a module on field recording, and also another module on sound design. And yeah, we ended up, like, as a class, we took a trip to New York, and we recorded ambient sound and then integrated it into a song when we got back to the UK. And it was right around that time, like, I just really loved recording back then. I remember, like, that started sparking interest in, like, watching more featurettes, right? So I started watching things like, I remember specifically the featurette in Terminator 2, and seeing all the work that Gary Rydstrom's team did. And I remember thinking, like, this is insane. This is so cool. And I kind of, yeah, I decided there and then this is something I wanted to pursue. I found it a lot more interesting than music engineering. You know, there was some cool aspects of music engineering in that you kind of get used to studio facilities and you know, miking techniques and stuff, but kind of for similar reasons to Kyle, it wasn't quite the right fit for me. And yeah, I ended up basically looking for a school that, like, had the best kind of, like, vocation afterwards. So Vancouver Film School was just, like, clearly they were talking about all of their graduates and where they got jobs. And it was like, okay, well, I want to make sure that if I'm going to go and do something like this, I want to be able to get a job afterwards. So I ended up going to Vancouver Film School. I met these guys. I returned to the UK after completing that course. I spent maybe like 6 months unemployed, but ended up getting, it was actually weird. I sent an open application to Ninja Theory, and about a week later, they posted 2 junior sound designer jobs. So it was just, like, really fortunate timing that I happened to be in there, like, almost immediately. And yeah, after a couple of months of interviews with them, that was like my first position. That was like maybe 13 or 14 years ago. So yeah.
Amazing. And Tojima-san, I know you spoke a little bit about your beginnings on Metal Gear Solid 2 when you were at Konami many years ago. But I was curious also for you, just, you know, how you transitioned into game sound even prior to then at Konami.
Yeah, so it will require 2 hours to cover the whole story, but so a little bit kind of quick version. So I owned a rock band, so in a kind of high school and college, you know, so I was a guitar vocal, you know, so in a not super popular band in Japan. So I wanted to be a rock star, you know, and I was a musician. So again, it's like I'm amateur, not professional musician, but like I created a music with guitar and synthesizer. I'm a singer-songwriter in a live, so I love the music. So I also love the video game a lot, but like to be honest, music was pretty much everything in my younger age. So music is cooler than anything else, I believed. And at the age of 23, it's like a time to giving up, so I couldn't get a chance to be a professional musician until then. And it's like a timing in Japanese culture to getting a start job. So then I'm kind of disappointed. So sadly start to finding a job. And so I kind of get an interview with music company like Sony Interactive and Music, or just kind of PlayStation and the Sega, kind of next gen console businesses started, and they started to hire the audio specific person as well. So I tried to getting an interview with them. And so I shared my demo, and actually most of my demo was get through their process, but eventually no company, no studio couldn't give me an offer, and with saying, so your music is great, but you don't have much knowledge around the computer. So then I eventually giving up to finding a job around the sound and the music industry. And actually I get a job for house sales company. I sold their house as a sales guy. And after 6 months of sales experience, I worked super hard. I did my best to selling home, but I fully realizing that, so this is not my life. I love music, I love audio, so my salary was actually pretty good. And I know that the way to moving to, game industry or music industry is gonna be very challenging, but no brainer anymore. So I just kind of told my boss, sorry, I will quit. Then I started to go to a night school to learn about the computer audio and sound technology, because I believed so my music and audio skill could be eligible to getting a job in the game industry. I just need to learn about the computer technology. So I learned in the night school, with working for two years. And after 2 years, so I got a top scorer in the night school, and I got a 10 of offer from the different company. And I started to work. I got a bunch of offer across small studio and a big studio, but I intentionally choose the smallest studio, which was called T&E Software. The company made pretty kind of legendary games like a Hybrid in a very old 80s era. Because that studio hired me as an audio director as my initial job, and wow, so it's I got a much more control and the freedom, and I can make whatever. But the studio is not enough big for business. They shut down, their business in just kind of 2 years, and but I already have a professional experience, and so one industrial friend from of the Konami just kind of asked me to join, and I started my career in Konami. So it's a still long story, but this is a quick version from my kind of starting point to joining a Konami as an audio engineer. Thank you.
That's amazing. And I just realized, I don't know how I didn't put this together before, but Metal Gear Solid 2, which was your first Metal Gear Solid game, came out right around the same time as the first Halo game by Bungie. I think within a couple of months of each other.
Exactly.
That's pretty remarkable. Well, one final question for you all. What advice would you give to young aspiring sound people looking to work in game audio?
Sorry, I lost my mouse there for a second. I think it's important to never stop learning. no matter where you are in your career. I think I learned the most important lessons later on or midway through my career. So it's important to have like a growth mindset, which is something I actually learned from Microsoft. And it's like, don't be afraid to take risks or make mistakes or even have to do revisions, right? Like a lot of sound designers, when they get their first job, they're really excited and they want to just kill it. They want everything to be the best. And if they hit a roadblock or they don't get the right sound, they get really discouraged. And you have to kind of learn how to bounce back from situations like that and get the right sound and not be afraid to make the mistake and get the wrong sound and eventually get to the right sound kind of thing. So I think it's important to just have a growth mindset and allow yourself to feel comfortable making mistakes or not always hitting it the right way or not being the best, and always reflect back about like what you can expand your skill set to. Like even today, I still try to learn stuff. Like I'm doing Python lessons on the side and Lewis, because I just want to get better at stuff. I see people show up and they're really fast and stuff like that. And so I'm like, oh, well, I gotta get faster too. So like, let me get into this and try this out and see whether I like it or not. So always keep learning on stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Add to that, just always keep experimenting, and try to learn as many tools as processes as possible. And also try to find ways that you could also be just really efficient and to be able to like really create very efficient workflows, to be able to create many different types of content, and just, don't get discouraged, and just try to keep patience. And, I think the harder you work, eventually luck will kind of come your way.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And with speed, you still got to take time to think about what you're doing and how to change it and make it right kind of thing. I notice that a lot too sometimes, is some people are so into like the automation that they forget about, you have to give some deep thought into that stuff. But I like the experiment inside too.
Yeah,
Like you never know what you're gonna find.
Yeah, definitely. And not trying to overcomplicate things, I think, you can kind of get in your head a little bit too much or try to do too much. I think one of the things a lot of beginning editors try to do is they'll just throw everything at the palette, and you end up you're create a mess, and you're going to have a bunch of things masking each other out. Less is more. Just keep it simple sometimes can be very valuable.
Yeah, simple is hard too. Like with the summer, we're running a summer associate program right now where we have some people from DigiPen here, and they get really shocked on how hard it is to cut a simple sound. Right, it's really easy to layer a lot of stuff and get a complex sound, but when you want it, you need to make a sound that got to stand on its own, and it's just like one or two layers. It's like something else, and that's, I think, something Tajin brought into like both me and your world, because like we both were really much like, especially around Halo 4 times, we were like, yeah, I can make a really cool sound really fast. Let me throw the kitchen sink at that thing. And I think that's what created a lot of hard situations for Tajin mix wise, because we were so adventurous with how we approach stuff. And like, it took time to learn how to be simple and how to like just be deliberate about stuff,
Yeah, I think first and foremost, this will sound really, really basic, but you just need to practice the craft. I think I see a lot of younger sound designers that maybe are more preoccupied with, being a personality on social media, or kind of like focusing on maybe like networking a bit too much. Those things are definitely valuable, and especially as a freelancer, they're going to be a lot more valuable. But really, you should always be able to rest on your skills as a sound designer. And the only way that you're going to be able to rest on those is by practicing a lot continuously. And I would say the other big thing is to, and I didn't take this advice at first, but it's definitely something I've learned since joining 343. I think you need to be impressionable with people that you trust their judgment. So you have to evolve over time and allow other people to inform the way that you go through a creative process. I can certainly say that like I feel like I'm a different sound designer having joined this team just by osmosis from Tajin, Kyle, and Robbie and others. It's like foundationally changed the way that I think about sound, just by being open to hearing what they think and how they go through a creative process. And yeah, you could be in a really bad spot if you wanted to be more closed-minded than that. I think you need to like, yeah, immerse yourself with as many people as you can that you trust and respect their skill set.
I think those are really good points, Jomo. And like, I think like networking does not replace hard work and putting in the time. I'm an advocate of the, I used to think it was the 10,000 hour rule, but somebody reminded me that it's actually the 1,000 hour rule. And I was like, shoot, I spent way too much time practicing, right? But like, it's that you're not really a master of something until you've spent like 1,000 hours on it. Or in my case, 10.
Yeah, so kind of we are still running, so I'm not sure like how much I can give person a great advice, but like just from my experience, so if like you are younger than me, and so probably that one word, so I want to share it with you is set your quality bar as high as possible right now. So rather than, kind of 5 years, in 10 years, right now. So because I believe like pretty much everyone in this today's audience has some, you are like ideal, fascinated artist or musician or sound designer or mixers or whatever, your ideal favorite game audio or movie audio or engineers, musicians. So, and which is your number one fidelity something like audio element. And if you have something, so you can try to hitting the same fidelity or even something more than that, probably in a year, if you try to achieve that seriously. Okay, so so usually people would feel it. So I have to run more, so I have to, run about these things and that things, maybe need a more knowledge and having a step as a professional worker, as a junior, and maybe in 10 years, I could achieve something similar to best things. But it was just wasted one time. So we have a shortcut actually. So because this was my experience, I talked detail in a Metal Gear Solid event previously. But when I worked for a Metal Gear Solid project as a first time as a post-production mixer without any experience, Hideo Kojima asked me to hit the same fidelity, at least same fidelity as a Matrix, which was one of the best sounding audio in the world. I didn't have any experience. My first Pro Tools touching experience, I didn't have any Foley worker, Foley stage, no budget, so just new to a post-production. But like his mission he gave me was hitting the at least same quality as a Matrix in 1 year. So, and I didn't talk like too much detail about that, but like after the kind of like iteration process between he and me, so it was not he was not just saying, he literally ordered me to hit that. So, and I did everything I could do without sleep. Like compared to a Matrix audio and my first post-production audio, what is different? So run a lot, try to finding, oh, this dynamics is different. So what is this very realistic, like a physical sound? Oh, sounds like, which is called Foley, So I learned a lot about the Hollywood process and everything with reading a lot of articles. I did everything as much as I could. And I seriously tried to hitting the Matrix quality in 1 year because it was clearly his serious ask. And after 1 year, unfortunately, I couldn't hit that. But I realizing that in this 1 year, I grew up a lot, like 10 times faster than previous my experience. So what I learned was, and then after the project, definitely I clearly have a motivation to hit the number one, kind of audio quality. So even like compared to like a film industry, I definitely seriously wanted to hit something number one in the world, which I'm still trying to achieve that with my beautiful audio team members, even right now. But my point is, if you are setting your quality goal, something like a okay, realistic place, I highly recommend to set your goal high bar, just kind of maximum right now. Then I believe like you can grow up even faster potentially based on my experience. And then lastly, I would say, so I'm working for this industry for, I think like over 20 years right now. And this work is really fun. It's definitely deserve to making your effort. So yeah, so I'm waiting for, kind of, so you will, if you are younger and you are even student, so you run something harder with your strong passion and, so working closely sometimes somewhere in an industry in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, all of you, really inspiring advice. I think it's all really on point and so helpful. Thank you, everyone. Kyle, Robbie, Jomo, and Tojima-san for your time. You all do incredible work and work on such an amazing game that sounds so just full and rich and detailed, and do very inspiring work. So thank you all for your time, for sharing it all with us tonight, and thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
That was a
it
pleasure.
was really nice. It was a great experience.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much,
Thank you.
Eric and everyone. It was very fun, fun time for me. Thank you. Have a great
Thank
night.
you so much. Thank you. And thank you everyone for coming. Hope to see you at the next MPSE Sound Advice event.